So when we're talking about real estate, the term leaseback gets thrown around a lot. Everyone's always like, what exactly is a leaseback? Today, we're going to go over all the ins and outs of what a leaseback is. Hey everyone, Kailee Ackerman here with the Central Park Scoop and Focus Real Estate. What is a leaseback? A leaseback, also known as a post-closing occupancy agreement, is pretty much a lease that the buyer of a property gives to the seller after the closing of the sale. Now, why would we want to do this? Well, for a seller, they're often wanting this leaseback because maybe they need the capital funds from the sale to put into their next home purchase. But there's a gap in there and they don't want to have to move twice. Move out of this house, rent a property for a couple of months, and then move again. So it is to the seller's advantage to get a leaseback to bridge that time and avoid the double move. Why would a buyer want to grant a seller with a leaseback? Well, in a competitive market, giving a leaseback to the seller that lines up with the timeline that they're hoping for will help your offer stand out amongst all the others. So that's the overview of a leaseback. Let's get into a few of the details. How long is a leaseback? In general, we see them for a couple weeks, maybe a month. Maximum is 60 days. There's reasons for that. Part of it has to do with lenders, part of it has to do with restrictions from the Real Estate Commission, but oftentimes it's just a couple of weeks depending on the timing that the seller needs and how much time the buyer can give them. So every situation is different. So how much should the rental rate be on a leaseback? There's a lot of different ways to do this. We're going to cover three of the main ones that we see frequently. In a competitive market, a buyer may offer a free leaseback. I know that sounds crazy, maybe, but if you're trying to compete with other offers, giving them a free leaseback can almost be more appealing than just adding a few $1,000s onto the purchase price you're offering. So that's one, free. Another one is that the buyer is just trying to cover their holding costs. That would be, their mortgage payment, their taxes, insurance, maybe an HOA, whatever. They're going to be happy usually if they can cover those costs while they're giving you the lease back. Probably a more expensive way to do it is to liken it to a short-term rental. You look at what the short-term rental daily rate is, and then you multiply that by the number of days you're giving them, and that's how they come up with the rental rate. So those are three of the ways that we see it done. There's a lot of different theories on the best way to do it, so you can kind of determine that in your situation. Another aspect of a leaseback is the security deposit. Just like any other lease you've ever had, there is typically a security deposit that is held by the landlord, or in this situation, a buyer. And you'll get that security deposit back after the leaseback is over, assuming that there was no damage incurred. So that said, you'll want to do a walkthrough at the beginning of the leaseback to establish the current conditions of the property. And then at the end of the leaseback, the buyer and seller, because the brokers are no longer a part of the equation after the closing of the sale, the buyer and seller will want to get together, re-walk the property to make sure that any damages are documented, because that could impact how much of the security deposit is due back to the seller after the leaseback. So those insurance policies help plan for the unexpected. But what happens when the unexpected actually happens? So an interesting thing in these situations is that the seller of the property, who's now a tenant, has to change their mindset about fixes and repairs. We've had this happen where right after closing, a dishwasher goes out, and your natural inclination is to be helpful and try to fix it as quickly as possible. But in these situations with the leaseback, you can't do that. You are the tenant, and as much as you feel bad about it, you need to reach out to the now owner of the property and let them handle the either fixes, repairs, replacements, and not take that on yourself. So that's the gist of a leaseback. I think a lot of sellers ask themselves, can I get a leaseback? That would be great. I don't want to move twice. And a lot of buyers are like, do I have to offer a leaseback? That is entirely market driven, and that is something that your agent can help walk you through. When it's a seller's market, you're more likely to see leasebacks. When it's a buyer's market, you're less likely to see leasebacks. If we can be of assistance and you have questions about these things, feel free to reach out to us at the contact info below.